Welcome back to the Future Plutonian. I'm Selena, and I'm so happy that you've come back for another chat today. This is the second video coming up on my channel since my first one. This is brand new. As I mentioned last time, I'm kind of doing this to sort of get over my fear of being on camera and being on audio. You wouldn't know it. I did work in radio at one time, many, many years ago, but I wasn't on camera and talking at the same time. So I'm kind of trying this out and just doing a very casual chat thing. This isn't intended to be ASMR. It's also not intended to be highly professional at this point because I just don't know how to do that yet. But thank you for joining me anyways. Today I thought I would do a video on weird things I've run into at different jobs that I've had. I've worked quite a few different jobs um, over the course of my life so far. I do currently work in the library field right now. I've worked at radio stations before, as I mentioned. I've worked in some other government agencies. I have worked in fabric stores, all sorts of places. And I've been in management in several of those jobs, and there are a few really weird issues that seem to come up every single place I work. And some of you out there maybe will find this relatable. The first thing that I tend to run into at several jobs over and over again for some reason is flooding. That's not terribly unusual in a lot of places. It's just weird how it keeps cropping up in different types of buildings and different types of businesses that I've worked in. And what's really crazy is also how people will still come into the building even when they are sloshing ankle deep through water if they want something that you have. For example, um, I used to be an assistant manager at a fabric store years ago, and the store was set in a building that used to be a grocery store. And we had some back stock in a back room where like the meat lockers and things were, and so there was this drain in the floor back there that started backing up one day when we had a lot of snow melting and some rainfall. This sort of thing tends to happen a lot when there's been a bunch of snow and the weather's getting warmer. And I came in, and water is backing up out of that drain, and it's coming out onto the sales floor and just getting everywhere. And this was over 30 years ago, so I don't exactly remember what we did to finally get that taken care of. Probably the owner of the building was contacted and had some kind of emergency services come in and deal with that. But there was a big sale going on at this store, and people were still wanting to come in. And we're like, there's water on the floor. It's coming from a floor drain. This is not water you want to be walking around in, but they did not care. They wanted those sales, they wanted those good prices, and I'm telling you, if you ever need to get up an army of people really quick, don't declare war, declare a sale. They will go through anything to get that. I had a library that I managed years ago that had a flood the day after Christmas, of course. It was an unusually warm Christmas. We'd had a bunch of snow, and then all of a sudden, rain, melting. I came in and opened the building the next day. We had been closed for Christmas Day. And went downstairs to where the archives were held and our programming room and a lot of the children's programming was held. And of course, there was water there, just everywhere. And, the first thing I had to do was, get some help from another department, get the shop vac out and try to start cleaning up as much as I could. Um, and I have this great big shop vac that I'm carrying around. The hose is everywhere. I look like Dr. Octopus. And somebody comes to the door. We weren't quite ready to open to the public yet, and it was the elevator inspector. I'm here to inspect your elevator. And I said, of course you are. Because why not? That's what we needed right now. So, anyways, he came down through the water, and part of the problem we learned is the dumbwaiter that was used for a book drop to take books up and down the different levels had a sump pump in it underneath down in the well that was no longer working. And he spotted that problem. He was a very nice person. This was not his problem to fix, but he offered to fix it for me if I would go and get the part, which I appreciated so deeply. So I scuttled down to the hardware store, got a new sump pump. He took the time to install it for me, and that helped to drain a lot of that water off and to keep further flooding from occurring at that time. So that was another mess to clean up. Um, I worked in another library that had some water backup during a construction project once, and that was a whole thing trying to get somebody to come in and deal with it. Interestingly, it was the fire department that came in. Um, they had a lot of equipment for cleaning up, water messes and things like that. So they were good enough to come over and kind of help us clean up with that. But it just seems to be a thing. Like wherever you go, at some point, there's going to be water in the building. And some of the other librarians that I work with over the years have commented that we need a whole course or a training session called Where's That Water Coming From? That's like part of the whole library training program, because that's one of the biggest things that you seem to have to deal with in a building is flooding, unfortunately. And that can cause some other problems such as collapsing ceiling tiles. I don't know why this happens so much, probably for the same reason that we get water damage so often, but I was working for a different state agency many years ago, and I had just started. Again, it's around Christmas time. That seems to be the time of year that these things want to happen. My new boss was going on vacation, so he was away that week, and here I am, kind of like the new person, and just starting out in an outer office, and all of a sudden, his office is dark, the lights are off, there's nobody in there, he's away, and I hear this crash from in there, and I thought, okay, what's going on? And I went in and looked, and the ceiling tiles over his desk had collapsed. They were wet and water was coming down, and it was all over his computer and his monitor and his chair and his desk and everything. And I'm like, oh my God. So I ran and found, another more veteran coworker, and like, good, the ceiling's collapsed, in this guy's office. And he said, oh no, again? Like, this has happened more than once, apparently. So yeah, we had to go and clean that all up, and apparently it was another one of those cases of water pooling up on the ceiling somewhere. I had this happen to my own desk at a library that I worked in. Came in one morning, again, middle of a renovation, and I had this whole new desk and area, everything that had been built, and there was this pile of wet ceiling tiles on the desk, the chair, just everywhere. And we had a couple of different contractors that were working on the project. And of course, when it came to trying to figure out who was going to be responsible for this, they kind of did this like, well, it's their shoddy work on the roof. Well, no, it's your shoddy work on, the plumbing or whatever. So, anyways, eventually we got that all sorted out. But I've seen ceiling tiles drop that were meant to be decorative at some point too, like, oh, this will be a beautiful feature, the public will love it, and then they start dropping off the ceiling. You got to wear a hard hat to go in there, so that didn't work out too well either. But collapsing ceiling tiles, I think, kind of go with flooding. It's, like the Doctor Who episode, water always wins in these things. On the other hand, going from really wet to really dry things, dead flies have been a recurring theme. And yeah, there's dead flies that get in your windowsills. They get on the corners, flies die, they have a short lifespan. But there's a few really notable like dead fly experiences that I've been through. When I was young, a young adult, years ago at a radio station, we had a photocopier near a window, and I was doing traffic, scheduling ads, writing ad copy, that sort of a thing. And, had used the copier quite a bit for stuff. And this fly came over and landed on the paper tray. And it just, I don't know, I think it ended its days there. I think it crossed over, whatever the Rainbow Bridge is for flies at that point, because it was just standing there. Now, a normal thing to do, anybody walking by there probably would have been just to, brush it or shoo it off. Uh, I worked with other young people. That's not what any of us did. One of the DJs I worked with looked at it when he was walking by, and he just hit the print button on the photocopier as he was walking by, thinking, it would just brush the fly off or whatever. That didn't happen. Its carcass got caught up on the barrel going through the copier and kind of burned onto it, if you know what I mean. And everything that we were copying out of there for a long time had this shadow of a fly on it, whether it was invoices that were meant to go out to clients or, our log sheets for the broadcast day or whatever. We kept having this fly show up. And our manager came by, and he's looking at that and he's like, that is the weirdest thing that's coming up on these copies, do you guys, have any idea what happened? And we're like, nobody was going to own up to that. So, of course, eventually he ended up taking the whole thing apart and having to clean the barrel off and all that sort of a thing. But that was a dumb thing to do. I'm really sorry that we, first of all, ran a fly through the photocopier and then we didn't own up to it later on. But it was also kind of funny at the time, too. Not too awfully long ago, I want to say about 3 or 4 years ago, a building we were doing a site visit in my current job to, which had been, in retrospect, thankfully closed to the public for a few years, was looking to reopen. And they wanted us to come do a walkthrough, look at the facilities, and see what was going on. Now, this is meant to be used as a public book circulating space, but it was attached to the town's fire department, particularly the garage where the trucks were stored. And I suspect that exhaust fumes may have contributed to this issue. But my coworker, who's also a very good friend, by the way, and I say that because she can make me laugh like nobody else on this earth can. We walked in there together and we looked up at the ceiling, and there were these dead flies everywhere. And they weren't just dead flies that, buzzed around for a while, lived their fly lives, and then dropped. It looked like Pompeii. Like it looked like a disaster had hit all of these flies in the middle of whatever it was they were doing at that given moment, and they just froze in time. We saw flies that were, they looked like they were coupling, if you know what I mean. I don't know what flies do. I don't need to know. It's just what it looked like. Flies that were in various stages of their day-to-day fly lives, just everything stopped. Everything stopped. And they were all frozen there like some sort of a weird time capsule of, fly culture, stuck on the ceiling of this building. And my friend and coworker looked up at that and she says, "So, what's going on here?" And it's one of those moments that I had to kind of go off and pretend to be looking at something else in the building because I started cracking up so bad I was afraid I wasn't going to be able to hold it in. We still laugh about that to this day because it was just It's just one of the weirdest things I've ever seen. Like, it's like, a canary in a coal mine kind of situation. Like, whatever those flies were subjected to probably isn't something that you would want human beings subjected to, is my guess. So, anyways, um, yeah, that was kind of spooky. That was a dead fly situation. A last thing that I'll kind of touch on, and this isn't everything, obviously. Um, there are all kinds of weird things that come up in work lives, but these are just things that I don't care where you work or what you're doing for work, sooner or later they're an issue. And the final one for today is dumpster drama. At some point in your job, something's going to get thrown away that shouldn't have. This happens a lot, especially in jobs that I've had where it's been swag, if you will, or gifts, giveaways, whatever, for a job fair or some, presentation we're going to do, or something gets left on a table. Janitorial custodial services don't know that it's something you need. It gets thrown away. And the next thing you know, there you are hanging over the side of a dumpster with a coworker, digging through, trying to find those things which got thrown out and shouldn't have. Um, I had one coworker in particular I thought the world of that, you know, she had on, I want to say she was wearing a skirt that day or something, but we were just hanging over this dumpster, digging around trying to find this stuff. And she looked at me and she said, "This is just making me sad and angry." And she said it in a very low key way, but you knew she meant it. And yeah, that was an appropriate response. Like, why did we have to be doing this? I have seen dumpsters also that weren't properly locked. Their wheels weren't locked. And another given state agency that I worked at, the same one with the collapsing ceiling tiles, um, we had a very, very windy day where one of the dumpsters got caught up in the winds. I mean, this was a severe windstorm. And this dumpster started rolling across the parking lot. And one of our colleagues was out there trying to catch it. He was this great, big, tall, older guy, and we could see him lumbering across the parking lot after the dumpster trying to catch it because it was going straight for this one car that one of our colleagues drove. It was her pride and joy. She had a name for this car. She had a vanity plate on this car. She took immaculate care of this car. And of course, that car got T-boned by that dumpster because our poor guy couldn't quite catch it in time. Broke the window, did some damage on the side. She was able to get insurance to, cover the damage and get the repairs, but she was brokenhearted over that. Um, it's like it's like once that dumpster started going, it just made a beeline right for her car in particular, of all the cars in the parking lot. And you could just see it unfolding and before your eyes, and there wasn't a thing anybody could do about it. Even the guy chasing it did his best, but he just couldn't quite get there in time. The wheels needed to have been locked, so lessons learned there. We did that in the future. Um, I would be interested in knowing if you have any stories about weird stuff that you've run into in your jobs. Is there some kind of recurring theme that you see, whether it's a building disaster or even if it's just types of behaviors maybe that you run into again and again? It tells me that, when you go into a workplace, and especially if you're in charge of managing a workplace, it isn't like, what if something goes wrong? Oh, something's going to go wrong, and it's going to be something right out of left field that you didn't even see coming. It's how you react to those things when they happen. It's the people that you have that are trying to help you out. It's, can we stay calm? Later, laugh about it, maybe not right in the minute while it's happening. But it also kind of underscores the need for some sort of a disaster plan wherever you go to. Like, if this happens, who are we going to call? If things get wet, who are we going to call? If a car gets smashed into in the parking lot, who are we going to call? What are the next steps? So those are some things that contribute to good work experience, but they also kind of make some interesting stories later on too when you're looking back and going, oh my God, I'm in a completely different job and yet here I am facing this thing yet again. So I'd be interested in knowing if you have any stories as well along those lines. It's really great to talk to you again. I know, again, things are new. I know my background is janky. I acknowledge that, but we're just here to chat, so it's all okay. This isn't meant to be, broadcast television quality talk show here. So hopefully we'll just be chill and have a good time chatting with each other. I hope that you have a really great day. I look forward to talking to you more. And please remember that you are the stuff of stars.